It's one thing to admire a poet. It's quite another to trust her. I trust Danusha Laméris. I've been working on bringing her for a couple of years. I'm just delighted that we've got her here now. I just jumped on it right away when I started teaching bonfire opera a few years ago, and then she said, I've got another book coming out, so it's like double great news. So we'll wait for this other book. We'll celebrate it. So here we are now. This afternoon, I had the delight to be able to sit in for an hour on the craft portion, the sort of craft talk exercise portion of Danusha's class. And it was one of the most instructive and companionable poetry hours I've had in recent memory. And I'm going to give a shameless plug because I know she won't do this, but are you still teaching private classes?
I am actually, yeah, I do teach online still. I teach at PACU and I teach online on my own.
Okay. So her website, if you go to her website, for those of you who might be graduating, and who are your second years and getting ready to graduate and say, well, what happens next? This would be a really cool graduation present or Christmas present next year or something like that. It's a wonderful way to like branch out and further your creative community. And I don't think I've ever once plugged anybody's private classes before, but I have to say after that craft talk today and my own writing and the exercise that she gave us, I would say that you would be well served at some point to take a Danusha Laméris class. Danusha's work is characterized by magnificent craft of syntax, image, and rhetoric, but it is also deeply companionable, present, and simply human. However, what attracted me most and convinced me I'll be reading her work for life is simply her poetry's wisdom. Wisdom in grief, wisdom of wonder, wisdom for kindness. I read Danusha's work and I feel I have grown, that there is more to me, more to my life than there was. Thank you for that, Danusha.
Oh,
Danusha Laméris is published in poems in all the places, right? All the places you want to publish. Best American Poetry, Plowshares, the list goes on and on. She's won or been a finalist for the host of Dream Literary Prizes. And now her third book, Blade by Blade, has recently been published in what I consider the best independent press in poetry in America, Copper Canyon. We'll be reading it in my spring workshop for something for those of you to look forward to who are taking my spring workshop. She teaches independent classes, as I mentioned, and she also teaches now in the low residency Master of Fine Arts at Pacific University. She lives in Santa Cruz, and as I learned today, 4 blocks from the ocean. It is a great honor for me and a great pleasure to welcome her to our writing community. Danusha Laméris.
thank you. Thank you so much, Jonathan, and all of you. That was just the best introduction ever. Ever, ever. I think that, as writers, we can hardly hope to know our work is really going to touch somebody or affect them in the ways that, I don't know, that we aspire to. So that's really the most meaningful feedback I think that we can receive as poets. So thank you so much for that. And thank you to everybody just for welcoming me to your community. And now we're connected. Now that we've connected, I hope that we will get to keep connecting into the future. That is my hope because I've really valued this time today. I was telling my husband, like, this was such a great group and I love these people and I wish I were up there right now. And life and travel and all this stuff is not always so easy, but I'm happy to be here this way. And since we were talking about time today and temporary worlds, I want to start with a poem that's kind of about that. It is about that. And I have this, it's not, and most of the poems I'm going to read are from the book, but this is like a little cutout because it was out recently in a journal. So here it is. It's easy to forget where you've been because something happens, then ends. Then something else happens and you forget what came before. You know how it is. Once you ate apples on the back porch, tossed the cores into the wet grass. Once you rode horses to a lookout high in the mountains into the underbelly of sky. Remember so and so. Remember when it used to rain in winter. Remember when you wore your hair short, dyed pink, pierced your ears all the way up the rim? You were someone else who had also been someone else. And who will you be next? Today, I walked down the beach holding hands with a man who used to be a microscopic dot. Now he has a beard and plays guitar. I was microscopic too. But now someone says, Danusha. And I say, yes? Temporary. One day they will say cloud, and I will turn my head, not head, in answer. So here we are in time. I love that I used to be a microscopic dot. I told my friend's son, who was, I think he was like 3 or 4 at the time, this little boy, Adrian, he was really into biology and science. And I told him that we all had gills in utero. And he was listening really attentively and asking me questions about it. It's not quite about being a microscopic dot, but being sort of aquatic. And he listened to me very attentively, and then he went running through the house and said, Mom, Danusha used to have gills. I felt so singled out. I was like, dude, so did you. We were all microscopic too. There's another one that I think, gosh, I think so much is about time and about the worlds we can't step back into, and maybe we wouldn't even want to, but there's still something about the fact that we can't. Let's see if I want to read this one or this one. I'm changing midstream here. They're both about that. I never know what you're going to read till you read it. Haunts. These days, we like to walk the old neighborhood, down the crisscross streets by the dog park, past the harbor, past Linda's Seabreeze Cafe, past my old house, a not much to look at beach shack built for summer, where the ghost of me still tends my old life. Roses in the garden, laundry on the line, my son in his wheelchair, head tilted up as I spoon that morning's puree. I can still hear the neighbor warming up his diesel truck, the clack of kids next door setting their skateboards on the sidewalk. At night, the saltwater lament of seals as I lie in bed, looking out the window at the shadowed green. It's been a year. Or 10. No, 20. A man I did not know then holds my hand as we pass the front yard where the new people have planted coppertip, daylilies, Mexican sage. I miss the way the light came through the living room at midday. The pine out front they had to cut down because it wanted to lift the house up by the foundation into the air. I thought there was another life, a better one. My son's eyes were dark as earth. We had to hold him close at night in case he had a seizure. I would have said then it was torture to love someone you couldn't save. But what did I know? How lucky it was. How lucky it always is to love someone at all. Maybe it's because of what we were sharing about in the workshop and looking at that I think that influenced the poems I chose because I chose them in between then and now. And this is one about, well, it's called Construction. And I wrote it when I was sitting in downtown Santa Cruz in one of the places that, one of the parts of downtown, which, well, a lot of the downtown came down in a big earthquake a month after I moved here. So I'd been coming to Santa Cruz all my life. I came here to go to college, and there was a huge earthquake. And the downtown, much of it turned to rubble. And I was sitting there, that weird feeling where you're sitting somewhere going, this wasn't like this before. This was completely different before the earthquake. And here I am later, and everything's rebuilt. Construction. I remember downtown after the earthquake, piles of rubble, metal gates set up to corral us in the middle of the road so we wouldn't step on all that broken concrete, on pediments fallen from doorways, makeshift memorials to people who died under the debris. Sometimes you'd pass a building's facade held up with beams, the rest of the structure gone, an empty lot visible through the blown-out windows. I know that place. That's saving what I can. Okay, I lost my house, but I'm alive. Or okay, my brother died, but I'm living twice. No, 3 times. For me, for him, and for my son. I saved the front of the building, its delicate arches and raised friezes. I didn't hate it. You could still buy socks or get coffee in these giant tents that popped up in the ruins. That's aftermath for you. The way we keep on drinking out of little paper cups, walking through disaster in our brand new shoes for everyone who can't. I was looking at, okay, I have a playlist, but I don't follow it. It just feels nice to have a playlist. It's reassuring. But, but then you just read what you feel like reading. This poem, the next one I wrote because I kept hearing stories from people who would find themselves facing something dangerous in nature. And they wouldn't turn away from it or do the safety things that you're supposed to do. And this happened, actually, I lived in a converted barn at the foot of the Santa Cruz Mountains, and my neighbor saw and let me know, it's good to let your neighbors know this, that she saw a mountain lion on our bridge that we took to get the mail. And I said, oh my God, what did you do? Did you lift your arms and make all these sounds and do all the things? And she said, no, I couldn't. I couldn't bear for the moment to end. The lion was looking at her directly, and there they were standing on the bridge, locked in that moment. She couldn't bear to ruin it. Oh my God, so much to unpack there. But this poem, even though she's not in it, that's one of the underlying things here. Lava. Once 2 women hiked a volcano, stood on the lip, and watched the fire move in the crater's mouth. Neither spoke, not even when the ground began to shake and they felt the rumble through their souls and up their legs. They just stood there, eyes fixed. Later, both admitted the truth. Each fought an urge to leap. What is it we would give our lives for? A mountain? A fire? A view from the cliff? Every year on the coast where I live, tourists die amazed by the Monterey Bay, swept from the shelf of rock overlooking the waves. And farther north, some people get so close to grizzly bears, they end up taking their stories with them into the darkness of the animal itself. surrendering to its life of fur and forage, to lumber through the woods at night, becoming, at last, a gorgeous, insatiable beast. And that one, of course, has traces of Grizzly Man in it, that Werner Herzog film, which is so incredibly odd. And yet I can't quite look away from it. I haven't seen it in a long time, but getting so close to grizzly bears, so in love with grizzly bears, the next thing you know, you're inside of one. Prayer to be Undone. This was inspired by the poet Nicole Brown. I don't know how many people have read her, but she's a Southern writer and she's a lover of animals. And she has poems like Prayer to Talk to Animals. I love that poem so much. So I thought I'd try and write a prayer too. I should have dedicated this poem to her. That's dumb. Now it's already like in a thing and I can't do it. Darn it. I don't know why I didn't think of that till this very moment, like a year too late. Okay. Prayer to be Undone. Great One, Maker, Weaver of things. I want to undress the tree to find you hidden there in the layers of sapwood, as you were hidden in a mango I ate today, its sweet and buttery flesh. A fly entered the house through the front door. Was that you? At sunset, a coyote limped across the field, looking back over its shoulder. I am trying to discern you. I'm trying to keep the door of my soul open so you can enter. Sometimes I wake up late at night, the sheets cool against my skin, and ask, why have I been torn from the tapestry of petal, scrub, and bark? But the sky is silent. The universe is one rhymed thing. But I keep wanting to rhyme with I, to capitalize myself, stand apart from the whole. I know I am a cloth, and someday you will pull my thread. Unravel me. Please unravel me with your deft, invisible hands. So funny how, reading this way, because I'm not on a stage at a podium, it's just always more intimate, even though we're apart. It's like we're all faces up close. It's so different. Often when you're on a stage, you can't actually see anybody because of the lights. And so it's just kind of cool to read this way, even though it's weird and disembodied and we're not holograms yet. It's still kind of sweet. It's good to do it this way. So many of these poems start with a thought around, some people start writing with a thing they see, like, oh, there's this thing I'm looking at. And I am not that person. I'm the person who writes a poem because my neighbor said she saw a mountain lion and couldn't walk away from it or scare it off. Or in this case, this next poem, I kept noticing how often when someone I knew died, their pet would also die the same month, sometimes before them. I don't mean die of grief after them. But sometimes it was after, but just how often that something like that happens. And I thought, well, that's interesting and strange. So that's what's behind this one. How often one death carries another. Like when my painting teacher, Eduardo, died, and the cat he'd had for years succumbed the same month to the same rare ailment. Or how, when they buried my friend's grandfather in Japan, the pond full of koi he'd tended all his life sickened, turned belly up. Who or what is in our keeping? A house unoccupied quickly sinks into itself, turns earthward. Long married couples are known to give up the ghost within hours of each other. Think of the hum that holds the walls together, the roof high, keeps the rot at bay a little longer. As surely we too are pinned here by others, whose presence urges our cells to replicate our lives more bound than we imagine. Even the woman I can't see, who lives in a studio on the other side of the wall, she washes a dish, and the water runs through the pipes between us, like blood through the arteries of a single heart. The odd connections. That was another thing. Houses. If you look at neighborhoods that have been sort of abandoned, it could only be 2 years that go by, and houses that looked completely solid and fine start to cave in. I guess the heat is not on, the pipes burst, a raccoon gets inside. It's so fast how things turn earthward. I like that we have a cat attending the reading as well. Cats love poems. Maybe just a couple more, and then we'll have time to talk to each other and all of those things. Um, yeah, I have a couple more in mind. It's nice when something that is an annoyance in your actual life can become art. And that is the case for me. I mentioned earlier in teaching, I have a little dyslexia. I didn't realize that's what it was till later in life, but I misread headlines constantly, for example. And so the news actually looks much more interesting to me than what it is. Even the news of the day to me can be shocking and strange because I'm always, well, I mean, it is shocking and strange always, but I mean, really strange because I misread it. And this is not a thing about the news, but it's about me misreading another word. And it's called regret, but the R is in parentheses. So it could be egret or regret. I see the word egret, but read instead regret. A trick of the mind, its reversals. One, a white slash rising from the marsh. The other, a stone strapped to the heart. The way I've carried all the would haves, all the ifs, each alternate exhausts. The egret wades in the dark water, seeking fish. The heart, constancy. I doubt the egret has regrets. Hatch, fledge, breed, hunt. And besides, a lovely name that comes from French. Aigrette, for brush, after the long feathers that stream down its back. How do its legs, bent reversed, move ahead? Who wouldn't want to walk like that? There are days I step outside my body, arise, fly over the field of my life, and glimpse not error, but river, rock, and oak, a wide expanse. Here and there a meadow, dry grass dotted with, could they be poppies? Some bright blurred orange flame. Regret. Oh, the egrets of regret, or the regret of egrets. And then I have one more, just a short poem. Is that good if I read that much? Can I read one more and we go, yay? Okay, good. Okay. I was like, want to make sure I'm fulfilling my readership duties and also not reading forever, somewhere in the middle. This was a little poem I wrote at night, and I'm happy because I got a quote in it that is something we say all the time in our house now, that came from my nephew's counselor when he was a little kid. And um, you'll recognize it when you see it in the poem, but it's something that my husband and I now say to each other all the time. And it got in a poem. Nightbird, hear me. Sometimes thunder is just thunder. The dog barking is only a dog. Leaves fall from the trees because the days are getting shorter, by which I mean not the days we have left, but the actual length of time, given the tilt of earth and distance from the sun. My nephew used to see a therapist who mentioned that at play, he sunk a toy ship and tried to save the captain. Not, he said, that we want to read anything into that. Who can read the world? It's paragraphs of cloud and alphabets of dust. Just now, a night bird outside my window made a single plaintive cry that wafted up between the trees. Not, I'm sure, that it was meant for me. Thank you, everybody. And now we can all go around saying that. When things happen that are obviously significant, we'll just say, well, not that you want to read anything into that. I'm not reading anything into it. Are you? Anyway, thank you all. And I forgot to say as I read, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. Oh, someone wrote about the documentary Fire of Love. Is that another Herzog one? I don't know what Fire of Love is. Can someone tell me? That was Jed.
It's about these two volcanologists who fell in love and go around and explore volcanoes together.
Oh my God, I really
won't provide any spoilers, but it's phenomenal.
Okay, so I'm going to put that from today. I learned that I have to watch the Sesame Street episode that has Chuck Close and Big Bird. And I've also learned I need to watch Fire of Love. And if I don't write things down immediately, I will never remember them. Fire of Love. Okay, these are some amazing recommendations. Volcanoes. Okay. Volcano doc. That's what I'll put. All right. And I am a very open book as a question person. So if people want to ask personal stuff about my process, getting into poetry or stuff about the writing or poems themselves, I'm always like pretty easygoing. Pretty much nothing I won't answer, whether it's personal or poetic.
And I'll kick off with a question that maybe will get the ball rolling.
Okay.
I'm wondering if there's the stuff I was saying about being wise. I have you in a category in my head as kind of with Wisława Szymborska, the Polish poet, with Jack Gilbert, with a handful of other poets who feel like they just don't care, right? I mean, they recognize, whether it's recognize their mortality or they recognize this is all going to be dust, and so who cares about reputation or whatever. I'm wondering if there was a turning point in your life and in your growth because clearly I meant what I said about your extraordinary capacity for craft, and lots of people have that and they work really hard to get that. And then I meant what I said also about your companionability, how you feel very presently human. And it feels like that for a lot of poets is enough, right? Like, if I just want to say things really, really beautifully, say some smart things, and then if I can be me, if it can feel like mine. But it feels like at some point in your career, you stepped off and said, I also need to say some things either for myself or for others, say them so that I can hear them about this life and like how we live this life and what we should do and how to comfort ourselves and how to fully occupy our existence. And I'm wondering if you can, it's hard to go back, I suppose, and like pinpoint these things, but I'm wondering if you can talk about in your life, if there was a turning point or two where you sort of set yourself free to go ahead and try to, and I guess the reason I'm saying set yourself free is because I think that the 20th century in American poetry was one of skepticism. That was kind of the dominant mode, was one of, I mean, post Yeats telling us all, the worst are full of passion and intensity, the best lack all conviction. I think we really took that to heart through
Yeah.
a couple of world wars and all the rest, and just were super skeptical. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if there was a stepping off point where you said, okay, that's enough skepticism. Now I want to mean something.
That's such an interesting question. And the way that you've conceived it and phrased it, I have never been asked that before. And so thank you for the question. And I had like 3 or 4 different things come to mind as you said it. One is that I really differentiate between the teachable craft on the page and the consciousness inside of the poem. And you cannot just sort of get yourself to do the consciousness in the poem, because you have to have digested experience in a certain way, I think. And so I think part of the answer to that is time, because you ask about a turning point. How did I go from and I understand the question also as from the point of view of an artist, because I trained in art. That's what I have a degree in, is painting. And so I understood I had to learn draftsmanship, like drawing, then learn color, learn light and dark. But that was nothing. That was just the skills, the craft of it. When you really are an artist, you then use those to say the things you need to say. And I didn't go that far with it. I got the basic skills and then I turned to writing instead. And so there is a point of freedom, I think, when you're like, okay, I can draw and I can work with light and color, to extend that metaphor. But what am I going to do with it? And it's, you know what? There's not really a turning point. It's the constant turning point, because I'm fully aware that if I ever stop living into my life a certain way, the poems will reflect that. And so it's, Naomi Shihab Nye says, your life is the poem. Your life is the poem that you're writing. And I think that's maybe the most profound thing I've heard anyone say about that, because it says you have to love and lose and struggle and triumph and just have all those things happen and keep engaging with life with curiosity and wonder and be open to it even when it hurts. That's the poem. That's the poem. So those were a couple things. I guess there was what I learned from being a visual artist, and then there's this thing about what Naomi said, and then I think those are really the main things that came to mind from that. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah. I mean, partly from what you didn't say, because you're younger than me, but you're old enough to remember when, sincerity was for suckers, right? Like there was a certain period in the 80s and 90s when, you went with considerable risk into the poetry world, wanting to say something wise or a little prophetic or, something significant, and kind of had to keep your head down if you're going to go that approach. And what you didn't say is there was a moment where you got yourself free from that freedom, or got yourself free from that fear. And so it doesn't sound like it was ever there, which is pretty great. Like when I said a turning point, it sort of implied there was a moment where you said,
About
okay,
fear.
I'm not going to be afraid of sincerity, right? I'm not going to be afraid of the skeptics. I'm just going to be me. So that's pretty great that it didn't seem like that weighed on you in the way I
No.
felt it to weigh on a lot of people.
I think that's accurate. I don't think I grappled with that. I think I had teachers who, in various different ways, were just so completely themselves that I understood the process of becoming a poet to be the process of becoming more and more yourself. And so when I have students too, it's like, well, how much of themselves can get in here onto the page? And that is what I understood it to be. And even now, I grew up workshopping things and I studied with mentors and I was very blessed to have all that. But I didn't show anyone my manuscript before I sent it out. I don't really do a lot of that. I didn't show the individual poems to many people, or if anybody. I mean, I don't really do that at this stage at all. And I encourage it at a certain stage. It can be very helpful. Just, are you conveying what you mean to convey? But I think my stance has been not that I can't share work, but that I kind of want to be my own weird self. And I don't want anyone to try and take that away. And I've developed enough of a sense of like, does this have the impact that I'm maybe hoping? Not that I always succeed at that, but that I have a clearer sense of it. So yeah, I think that my thing has just been, I need to write the poems I need to write. And it's funny, I do teach a class that's called the 9 lenses of poetry, that just, I came up with these lenses as I see them, but it's looking at contemporary poetry and looking at the different ways people write so that you can understand and embrace the way that you write. And I put my own writing, a lot of it, in the soul keeper category that I invented, that I care about poems that speak to the soul in some way. And Lucille Clifton was in that tradition. Naomi Shihab is in that tradition. And so I just understand myself to be in that tradition. Then there are the bards of the everyday, like Phil Levine. I think Jane Kenyon too, who we read a poem by today. These people, what they eat for breakfast, who they live with, what their daily life is like from their poems. You're not going to know that about me from my poems. I'm not a bard of the everyday. And I love those kinds of poems. So I created that so that I could also, maybe there was some grappling, because then I'm like, okay, I accept where I am and I understand where I am. And if someone's writing something really avant-garde, I understand where they are in that sort of mandala of poetry, and I can appreciate what they're doing for what it is. And the wry observers often have that really dry, kind of sarcastic, kind of edgy thing going on, and I love it. And I'm like, that's not me. That's not how I show up in the world, and I love it. So that's been helpful. Okay, so
That's super healthy. That's super healthy. Mark Halliday was one of my primary teachers, and Mark Halliday's sort of primary response to 95% of poetry is, "Oh, brother." Right?
I hate it.
Yeah, he's determined to try to get down to a level of sincerity, but he feels like the only way to get down to that level of sincerity is through the distillation of a ton of gallons and gallons and gallons of acidic skepticism, and then that will boil you down to some actual sincerity.
I love that. And he comes by it honestly, I'm sure,
Yeah.
right? So that's the thing about that kind of a stance. It's like, well, if that's how you see the world, and I call it being a liker or a hater. I was having a funny conversation actually with Ada Limon about this on an online class where I was hosting and interviewing her. And I said, there's likers and there's haters. And she was like, oh yeah, I'm a liker. I just read things and I like them. I look out my window and I like it. I'm a liker. And I was like, me too. And I said, but I love the haters. And she goes, yeah, that's the thing about being a liker. You even like the haters. So that's just a funny aside. But yeah, Ada is also not like dry like that. She's just like, I love things. Look at the bird. But some of my favorite people to be around are very dry and somewhat bitter pills, and I just enjoy their company. So go figure. All right, I think we have another question over here. Okay, from the watch party. I'd be interested to hear about your process. Okay, so I will ask for clarification. My process of becoming a poet, my writing practice. Hop on, Rook. Let's see.
Whatever you think would be the most interesting one to talk about, that would provide the most wisdom. We've been over here like talking about how we totally agree that with Jonathan that you're so wise, and I'm just so interested to hear more of your wisdom.
Oh my God, no pressure.
There some background, some of us have been dealing with writer's block. So like hearing about other processes would be useful.
Okay, I like that. Thank you for giving me the why. I should have asked that because that helps a lot. So to be a writer over time and to keep writing, and by the way, you all are such strong poets that I'm not seeing that side of the problem, but I know what it's like to, live live the day to day of it. I don't. Okay, let me go backwards. To be a writer and to keep doing it, you have to play tricks on yourself and on your mind. And so I'm going to talk about some of those tricks because I really believe this and I've experienced it. I tell myself, I'm not a writer. I'm not a poet. I'm a reader. And I love to read poetry. I read a lot of it. I like to read some every day. And so I trick myself by going and taking some books and my cup of tea, and I go and read. But I happen to have my notebook nearby, which is really nice. I also believe in all the oh my God, look, my notebook is in a little thing that's leather and a pen lives in it. It's really cool. So I just get really into my stationery and my rituals. But I'm not a writer, I'm just a reader. So I go and I read, and then I can't help but write something. When I'm reading poems I love, it's like when we did the prompt today, we read a couple poems, and it's like, oh, let's write something. So that's trick number one. I'm a reader primarily. And that's true, actually. I'm primarily a reader who happens to write. The other thing is, do I do edits? Do I tell myself, okay, you have to go work on a rewrite and do edits? No, that sounds really boring. Or hard. How do you revision? I have to re-see everything? I have to revision this? No. So I tell myself I'm just going to tinker. You know what? I'm going to open my Word docs and I'm just going to kind of tinker with some stuff. No big. And so I make everything small or take the pressure off the poetry part. I think also once you have, there's the pressure to have a book. And then once you have a book or two, it's like, oh, you have to make another book, or that book better be better than the one before. And there's just so much nonsense all the time. And so I try to make everything little. And if I write for 20 minutes, fabulous. If I kind of get lost in it and tinkering for a couple hours, well, that's cool. Great. And I also tell myself, do you know what, Danusha, if you wrote one poem a month, you'd have a book in a few years. Books tend to have around 40 poems in them. I'd have a book pretty quick. If I wrote one poem a month, I don't have to write very much or worry about all that. So a lot of it is we psych ourselves out. I can't talk about this. Oh, really? Says who? Talk about it. Write about it all you like. You can worry about where you want to share it and how later. Or I don't have time to write. Do you eat food? Maybe while you're eating food, you have your notebook with you and you're just alone sometimes when you're having lunch. When I had a kid with special needs, my son Santiago that I wrote about, I had a very small notebook. Why? Because I'd be holding him and writing in this tiny notebook, over his head. And so I was just like, yeah, I'm doing a lot. I'm a mom. I'm in the hospital with my kid. And I would be taking notes on stuff the nurses said to me and doing. So I just always try to integrate the writing into life without making it too big of a deal or too fancy and special. And when I look at poems like the ones that we were looking at today and the Liesl Mueller and the Jane Kenyon, that language was so simple. Those poems were very simply constructed. And I like to remind myself the tools of our craft are a pen, even just a note card, some words, time. Those are our tools or ingredients. They're also very simple. They're also very simple. And so I don't know I hope that helps answer some of that, but it's kind of this sense of well, what do I really need? A little time. What am I? A reader. And you might even write your own personal manifesto of why the hell am I doing this? That's super helpful. I have that document still in my computer, I'm sure, even though I haven't looked at it in a long time. Because before I had a book out, it took me forever to write a book. I had a lot going on in my life, as many of us do. And so I wrote a thing why am I doing this? Why do I care? Because I could be doing other stuff. And one of the things was, I want a woman in my lineage to say the things, to have a voice. And one was, I want my niece to see somebody in the family who has a voice. I want da 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 da. There was stuff like that. Not like, I wouldn't have known how to think about why if I hadn't sat to really think about it, given that some time. Know what you're standing on. And that helps a lot. That's my answer, I think. Thanks for asking. I like the thumbs up over there. It's very encouraging from the watch party. And I see Grace has a question. Do you want to say the question or do you want me to read it in there, Grace?
You can read it.
I can read it? Okay. I'm so interested in your life as a multidisciplinary artist. I know that you discussed it a little bit earlier, but do they inform each other? The visual art and the writing or whatever else I create? Well, I don't know, but I think so. I'm not currently doing much visual art, but I think those years of training, first of all, were some of the happiest years of my life because all I had to do was show up to school and look at things while listening to music and hanging out with my friends. It was really great. Looking deeply at things and at light and color. And I mean, how can that not translate into poems? I think that focusing on image and light and moments, slowing down time, that was all present in training as an artist. I maybe a lot of art is about slowing time. And so I learned something about that I still carry. And also the painter that I studied with, Eduardo, talk about practice tips. He had some quote he would say to us a lot. But the essence of it was that he said, Danusha, just pick a thing to do with your life. Just pick anything. And then work at it a little every day. That's all. He made it sound so easy. And also my roommate's ex-boyfriend said something like that to me around the same time. He was about to ride his motorcycle across the US in winter. He would do stuff like that. He would make mechanical toys that moved. He did all these interesting things. And he asked me, he's like, Danusha, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What do you want to do with your life? I said, I don't know. I like art history. I've thought about being a writer. I kind of want to paint. I don't know. And he said, here's how you do it. You just pick a thing and you say it and then you make it true. That's how you do it. And I was like, what is he talking about? But I sat and thought about it and I said, okay, I'm going to paint. I'm going to study art. And then I did that. And then after that, I ended up taking a writing and poetry workshop. And I said, okay, I'm going to be a poet. That's what I'm going to do. So I loved his advice. Just say a thing, make it true. Make it true. So I think sometimes the things I learned from the art side of life, some of them just had to do with how do you commit yourself to something that you think you can't do. I didn't think I was particularly gifted as an artist. I was jealous of my friend Sarah, who I thought was a real artist. But what I understood was that didn't matter. I just had to say a thing and choose a thing and say it, and then just do it. And then do it every day. That was it. Or most days, So that's how I think they've most informed each other, to answer that question. Thanks, Grace. Quite the Q&A. I don't know if we're to this hour or something. You'll guide me, Jonathan, on the time and all of that. But
Sure. Man, what a great conversation. I bet we could do one more, or if it's quick, we could do a couple more. We don't want to keep you late, but Yeah, at the same time, I've never been the one to call last call. I'd have been
Okay.
a lousy
Well,
bartender.
I'm happy. I'm
I'd have
content.
been a lousy bartender. So okay,
Sure.
second. So we'll call it second to last call.
Okay, great. Jed.
Hi, thank you so much. This has been amazing, wonderful, loving it. I think one of my kind of favorite questions, or things that I'm most curious about, for someone who's chosen an artistic life and career, if you want to use that word as you have, it kind of comes from this book, Why Poetry. I haven't read it yet, but I love the book and I love the question, and I'm curious. I think there's been some of your answers throughout the conversation, but I'm curious if your answers change over time, and if so, how and in what ways.
Oh, that's interesting. Why poetry? I think at first it was heartbreak and those things that, and you go through in your 20s that make you want to say something about it. Maybe that was my reason in the beginning. Like, how do I deal with being in love and all the complications and all of that stuff? And so I think that that was part of it in the beginning. And then later, it became a life raft in so many ways. Not just, oh, I want to express this thing, but like, oh, this is the raft of my life, this writing thing. This carries me across the water somehow to people. Like here, how did I arrive here? Poems. How do I keep arriving in the different places in life? And poems are bringing me most of the places. And so I think it went from being, oh, it would be nice to have a way to express some feelings, to I've given one of my main places of devotion to this. And who was it that said, I threw an invisible rope in the air and it has held me? Was that Czesla Milosz? Or it might have been. A poet said that. I threw an invisible rope in the air and it has held me. And so I think it's become more about sustenance and life raft and things like that. So yeah, it changed over time. Thanks for asking. And any last question or thought, if there is one, otherwise we can close our circle. But I'm going to miss all of you. I just feel like I found kindred spirits at a distance. So
You will continue to be with us because, like I said, I'm teach Blade by Blade in the spring, and then I'll probably cycle back and through the books, and you'll be on thesis lists. You've been on 4 or 5 thesis lists already in the last
goodness.
3 or 4 years. So
Awesome.
you've been here after
Little
Amanda,
did I know.
and you'll continue to be here, and then we'll have you back in present.
I'd love that. I'd love to come back and visit with you all. And again, I've just had so much appreciation for the poems that you shared earlier today, both the ones that we had in the packet and also the ones that were written in the moment. That was just really cool to see. And I can really see that you're a group that's very dedicated to the craft. That's what I came away with too. It's like, wow, that shows. And for every poem that I saw, the form really fit the subject matter. And there was just, you could feel it. These were poems that were really working on all cylinders. And so I thought, okay, this is a serious group of poetry folks out here. So I'm glad to get to connect with you and wish you a good rest of the semester until we meet again somewhere. Thank you.